For me, I tend to think too much about the consequences of making a bad decision and not nearly enough about the consequences of making no decision.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story. But before I launch into my story, I realized that we've been announcing our little contesty drawing for Starbucks card at the end of every episode. And while this might shock you, I'm not sure everyone listens all the way to the end. I mean, I don't know. I really have no way of knowing, but it occurred to me that we might want to mention it earlier. So before I tell my story,
why would somebody who doesn't listen all the way to the end be entitled at all?
It's not about entitlement. That's not it. All right. So here's the deal. As you know, we have a Facebook group and we also have our little texting platform. And if you join either one of those or are already in either one of those, each week between now and our shared birthday on September 1st, we'll be doing a drawing for a Starbucks gift card. And John Gartrell was our first card, so I'm going to be shipping that out to him soon. And I did a drawing right before we got on to record. And this week's winner is Christine Collins, who is both a member of our Facebook group and also just joined our little text thingy last week. So
cool.
If you want to get to either one of those things, you can go to sohere'smystory.com. There are links at the top of the page for both how to text us as well as how to join the Facebook group. If you do the texting thing, just make sure you do the second step, because if you don't do the confirmation of your contact information, we don't get it and we can't text you back. So that number is also, if you just want to punch it into your little old phone, is 410-632-6894.
And that spells one more time.
What? It spells nothing. I went through every single website where you could figure out, there's nothing even remotely anything that it spells. So 410-632-6894. And now here's my story.
Okay.
So last year, the part of this story that is relevant is the fact that it repeats. Last year, we were trying to find a place to, it was the middle of the pandemic. Vacations are really important to my family. It's like our best time. we have the best time as a family when we're not right here, when we're off someplace else together and the kids spend more time together. And it's just, we have a lot of fun. And so we really wanted to do something last year, even though we couldn't do much of anything. But as many people did, we thought, well, what if we do what we're doing here, just someplace else? And we had a place all worked out, and then we got shut out of New York. New York changed their things. And so we had to cancel that. And then I was looking for another Airbnb somewhere. And to make a very long story short, I had gone into full Jody nerd analysis mode and had like a spreadsheet to compare them all, because, it was where they're located and how much and what days they were available, because we were doing it kind of last minute. And lots of places only had like 3 days but it was a super cool place. Or this place had 7 days, but it was like, wasn't super interesting or whatever. And so I had labored over it, as I do. And because I can definitely overthink decisions, but for valid reasons sometimes. And I got kind of tired and run down, and I had showed Paul, and I said, you know what, let's come help me think this through and which one's best. And he helped me pick one. He's like, that one's great. I said, yeah. I was like, I just had one thing that was kind of bugging me that wasn't quite right, didn't feel the way I wanted it to feel. And so I was like, you know what, I'm tired right now. I'm going to do one more pass in the morning and then book it if I can't find something better. Well, dun, 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 in the morning, it's booked. The one we wanted was booked, as were 2 or 3 others that were like our other contenders. And I had to start the whole process over again. So obviously that was just like full of regrets. And I was really mad at myself for not just finishing it up and doing it and being done with it. I would like to say that I had learned my lesson the hard way that particular time. So 2 weeks ago, I am planning our upcoming vacation, looking through Airbnbs, again, finding like all these because of course we never plan anything far enough out to have like all the options. So there's limited options, and I'm going through all these variables. And I literally said to Paul, because it was late in the evening, I said, I probably ought to just pick a place, because you know what happened last year. But I am just zonked. I was so tired. Like I could hardly see straight because long story, and I literally said the words like, I'm going to be so mad if tomorrow this one that we think we want is booked. And I shut my laptop and I went to bed.
What happened next, Jody?
The place was booked in the morning. I literally Paul actually just left the room because he didn't know what to do with me because I was upset that the place was booked. In all fairness, there was one time, in this case, we had not decided on the place. There were a cascading number of decisions we had to make first about how badly we wanted to work these other things into the trip in order to be able to get to that part of the road trip in time to spend the days we want. So there were a couple of decisions to be made. And I just didn't feel like either of us had decision-making mojo going on in our head. So I put off those decisions to the morning and then we'd book the house and we had multiple options, whatever. But not only was I mad that it was booked and that I had to go back and look for new places and whatnot, but I was just like the amount of irritated regret and frustration. And like, I just sat there, I was like, what is wrong with me? I literally said the words, if this is booked tomorrow, I'm going to be upset. And then I shut my laptop. And I was joking with Paul about how, sometimes with nutrition or working out stuff, I feel like my body gets upside down. Like my whole sense of orientation gets like out of whack and I'll be dying of thirst and I'll have the thought, I bet I could go a little longer. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like you're dehydrated, or I don't know. It's just like self-defeating or self-sabotaging behaviors, or I don't know. It just seemed like a topic that I'm hoping you're not going to be like, nope, Jody, you're just broken. I don't have that issue.
Right. And the end of the episode.
Right. And Jody's sad.
No, I tend to think, I don't know if this is where you reach in your analysis of it, but for me, I tend to think too much about the consequences of making a bad decision and not nearly enough about the consequences of making no decision.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so that's where I run into an issue on things large and small. I mean, one of the examples was I have long had a rant. It's become a running joke here that July 4th is a holiday. July 5th is not a holiday. July 3rd is not a holiday. And July 6th certainly is not a holiday.
When does July 6th ever get pulled in? What is the scenario by
July
which?
July 4th is like a Saturday. And anyway, people were saying on the Monday.
Okay.
So anyway, and it's a rant. I've gone on a full rant here. And it's not like we don't give other dates, the Friday after Thanksgiving, the day after Christmas and all that stuff we give off. But for some reason, I was like, it's not generally a traveling holiday. So no. Well, anyway, so we had a couple situations here and people were like, okay, well, and Shelley was asking, hey, is the Monday after July 4th, is July 5th a holiday, whatever. And I got this email in and I went back and forth with her a little bit on Teams, responding to her that says, look, you can take the day off as long as, you don't think that what you do is important here. But the bottom line was, I didn't feel like dealing with this because I knew what my rant was. But at the same time, I was traveling back from the beach on Monday, and I don't like asking people to do things that I'm not going to do. I don't like saying, hey, no, it's not a holiday for you. You have to go into work when I'm not going to be there. I didn't like.
Right, but you were taking the day off, right? I mean, you weren't counting it as a holiday.
No, but either way, I just didn't like the optics of that. So what I decided to do was not really make a decision. I'll get to that later. I'll respond. I'll figure it out, whatever. And I'll talk to Kim and I'll do. And then as it got closer, I realized, it'd be kind of a lousy thing right now to tell her the day before on Friday that no, you have to, because she has daycare arrangements that, daycare cut off and, or was off on that Monday.
All right. So a whole other not this episode is like my curiosity around like, don't you have a published like list of like, you're not deciding holiday by holiday what counts, right? You
Well,
have like
but take a look at the holiday by holiday thing. It's not like anybody's really asking for Columbus Day off. So there are a limited
Fair.
number of holidays. Nobody says, hey, is it our policy to give Father's Day off? Nobody says that. So there's really not too many up in the air kind of days, but this happens to be one of them. And so much so, like your story centered on last year's experience. This has been a rant for me for like 15 years.
Right.
So it's not like I didn't see it coming, but I really decided not to do anything until the decision was kind of made by my indecision. Right. It's not a horrible thing, but I probably, had I really addressed it, I would have said, look, Monday we're working and let's just go forward. But the consequences of indecision for me were setting basically what amounts to a precedent in the company.
Yeah, no, and I definitely, I definitely, when things matter to me, because this does matter to me, there's a certain, I never need us to stay someplace fancy. If anything, I'm hoping to find something kind of quirky that makes for a good story because it was like slightly weird, like in a good way. Like I want, there's an experience, there's a way I want it to feel. There's an experience I want us to have. And so I don't go for the Airbnbs that sort of feel like you're staying in, Kevin and Sally's house in, random suburbia, or just in someone else's house. Like, I don't know. There's a way that I want them to
starts with, so we were staying in a shipping container.
I'm not against a shipping container. I would stay in a shipping container. It doesn't have to be that weird, but just like something that has a little bit of character to it or something. And there's some other criteria that I sort of look for, but anyway, so it does matter to me because I want there to be space where we can I like sitting outside in the morning while everyone else is asleep and having some kind of view. Again, it doesn't have to be like of the entire Smoky Mountain range kind of view, but just, I don't know that I want to be looking at a privacy fence 4 feet away from me and, whatever. Right. So, when things matter to me or when things feel higher stakes, like buying a car or a computer or something, I will almost without fail, make a spreadsheet about them because I can't hold all the variables in my head and I want to be able to compare them. Whereas Paul,
sometimes you want them at 45-degree angles.
and Paul is much more decisive, but then, he'll be like, oh, I just got that car. And then he'll be bummed that like, oh, you can't get a trailer hitch on that car. And therefore we can't take our bikes anywhere because we can't hook up the thing. And that's the kind of thing I'm like, oh no, like I would be so bummed if I like excluded a thing that matters to me. But I overthink, I really, really do on a lot of things. And yeah, and not making a decision, not only is it making it, I liked what you said, because there's that classic, not making a decision is still a decision, like, of course. But then I like what you're saying. There's like also risks of not making a decision, which is that they get made for you. And then you have to, waste time and energy and whatnot. But you would think that I have actually been putting myself on like what I consider like a decision diet sort of, where I just make myself choose and like choose and go and choose and go and choose and go. Because as my sister said one time, I was buying a present, I think for our mom maybe, and I was toiling over them and I couldn't decide between this thing or that thing. And she said 2 really profound things. One was, well, don't forget, she's only going to see one of them. So she's not going to be like, you should have chosen door number 1. Right. She's like, and second, if they're that hard to decide between, then it probably doesn't matter. And I was like, huh, that's very interesting. So if I'm just deciding between 2 things and it feels hard to decide, I just decide. And that's one way I've speeded up my, speeded up. Is that even
I was going to ask you about the word speeding.
Sped up. Okay. Thank you. You knew what I meant. So it counts as a word. That's my thing.
It did. So it's interesting because part of that depends upon not just the decision being made, but how you communicate that decision. So with what Brittany would say to you, I remember talking to a friend of mine, and he said how somebody in his office came in with muffins from this bakery that they really liked. And in handing him the plate of muffins so he could choose one. What she said was not, this bakery makes the best muffins. She said that, plus, unfortunately, they didn't have the blueberry. So his first reaction on seeing the plate is, I get muffins. But his second reaction was, I wonder what the blueberry would have tasted
Right,
like.
and I've been cheated out of blueberries.
Cheated out. So in business, if you say, I made decision X, this is what we're doing. That's different from I made decision X, this is what we're doing. I thought about doing Y, but decided on X, because once you bring that into, people start second guessing, well, wait a minute, what happened if we did Y? What's the reasoning for not choosing that?
Well,
and I raise that only because, a client of mine, talking about indecision, a client of mine was trying to figure out whether they took on this particular contract for this company. And he was really agonized over it. The cost of not making that decision timely had part of his team preparing to take on the business and the other part not caring about, booking things for the time they needed to spend preparing, because they figured that business would never happen. And so he realized he was either going to tick off the people who wasted their time preparing for business he never intended to take, or he was going to tick off the client by not being as prepared as he should have been. Or maybe the third possibility is tick everybody off by making them work overtime because of his indecision.
Yeah, no. So I hear you on the not presenting the, like in the, how you communicate, especially if you're not presenting like the better thing that's not available. I sort of have the opposite advice though. I don't even know if it's advice, but just something that I find kind of frustrating, or I see other people finding frustrating, is, a lot of times, as you know, whether it's picking insurance for the company or, any kind of large multi-decision kind of thing, a lot of times there was no blueberry. There was no great choice that you wanted to have. True. It's a pile of meh choices. None of them are great. None of them are perfect. You're having to decide between like what you care about most, because every one of them is lacking something that you want. So which thing do you least care about not having? And so I often see the frustration of, like, you go to present to a larger group of what a decision was or what a choice was. And a lot of times they're like, oh, this is blah, and I want to be like, you should see the other 4 choices. Like they were even worse. And so sometimes but that comes back to, helping to communicate what the choices were, maybe not saying, oh, there was a really good insurance that we couldn't have. But anyway, no, I hear you. So I don't want to skip over the point that you did not. You went on to like decision versus indecision, which is fine. And so I am standing here solely on my own in the self-sabotaging repeating behaviors column. Like, I'm going to skip right over that. So that'd be a great thing, by the way, folks, to text in or put in the Facebook group to make me feel less broken and whatnot. But
make Jody feel less broken. It sounds like a fundraiser.
It does. No, I think there's, I think we all have our places where we like spin our wheels on a particular kind of behavior or trouble spot or something. And a lot of times I think the awareness of that is helpful, and then it keeps you from doing it. But then there are certain things where it's, actually, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the podcast, but it's perfect for this. Every year, apparently, I heard this on NPR one time. Every year, there's a committee of people that get together to decide. All these people submit words to be included in the Webster's dictionary. And there's a huge committee every year I don't know if it's a huge committee. There's a committee of people that have the huge undertaking of weighing whether words meet whatever criteria it is to be included in the dictionary. And this woman was telling this story that, every year they collect their favorite words that don't meet the criteria, many of them by a long shot, but that they love and kind of wish on their own could be words. And I will never forget this when she said, hands down, my favorite word that I hope someday is a word is pregret. which
Right.
is I know that I'm going to eat, I'm going to regret this, but I'm going to do it anyway. She goes, for instance, I regret eating this entire cake. And that was absolutely, I was like, I regret closing my laptop and waiting until tomorrow. And all, I mean, like I said, we were exhausted, and I don't think we would have done a very good job of mucking around all the other sort of moving part variables that had to sort of be decided before we could lock in a place. So it probably was somewhat unavoidable. Well, it wouldn't have been unavoidable if I just booked it like 2 or 3 months ago. Then that would have been a avoidable way to do it. But I think pregret is just a fantastic word, and it very much sums up my.
No, I do love the word. I had the more cumbersome, that Monday Elliot is really going to hate Friday Elliot, because
Interesting.
I just decide to leave. I'll get that done on Monday, and then I realize that no, I'm really going to look back and hate Friday Elliot.
That's really funny.
I do have those self-sabotaging behaviors. I also find it if something happens, I should have gotten back to this person more quickly than I did, and I think and it was fine. Everything was fine. Then they contacted me again on something else, and I think, oh, I really need to just break the speed barrier in getting back to them, whatever. Right. And then I just don't. And I don't know why. And sometimes I have to analyze that. Why is that? Is that because I'm not doing my best work with it? Is that because there's something deeper that's underlying it? What's the reason for that self-sabotaging behavior? But other than my default, which is that, like you said, I'm broken. Other than that, is there a reason that I'm voting with my feet? That I'm just deciding not to do it.
Yeah, I think there's, and I don't think it's one answer. I think there are times, I think some of it's probably just glitches in the human operating system. I think sometimes there's a very real thing about like the part of your brain that your prefrontal cortex that makes decisions about things based on consequences, that can say like, oh, if then, and stitch that together, does get depleted throughout the day. It's why it's harder not to eat a bag of chips at night than it is, so many people have that pattern of they wake up in the morning, they're eating and drinking all the right things, they're feeling great. And then sort of there comes a point in the day where you're like, I would eat an entire box of Twinkies now and not think twice about it. And just where it gets harder to manage impulse control, it gets harder to make more complex decisions without making mistakes. So I think part of it is there comes a point where, Friday Elliot has spent an entire week pouring his neurons into client stuff, and you're probably just kind of done. And so even though Monday Elliot doesn't like it, it may actually be a good choice to kick that further down.
It may be, but Monday Elliot has no compassion for last week's Elliot. It's just Monday Elliot's kind of a when you get right down to it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think there's just a finite amount of energy that you have sometimes, and decisions do take up a lot of brain energy, especially the way I do them. I really make them work for it.
It's just a matter of how much mental energy am I going to expend later on because I didn't make that decision earlier. That's the cost of indecision for me. Just because then you've got the two layers, really. One is recovering or digging yourself out of the hole of indecision. And the other, at least for me, is castigating myself for whatever failure led to the indecision in the first place. And that's a very real layer that takes up mental energy and focus.
Well, and I'll tell you a thing that really and this is not something I have all the time, but there are phases where, especially if I'm in a period of time that for whatever reason I'm either super overwhelmed or maybe I'm just down, or as we've said, business depressed, or just, a lot going on or whatever, that if there are things I'm putting off, like that client email that you're like, oh, I got to get right back to them. And then you get distracted or you decide not to, or whatever. And those things start building up when they become a list of like, if there are things that you are now almost avoiding because they feel yucky, and as that list grows, at least for me, I don't know if this is across the board, it then becomes like 10 times weightier than it actually is. And it's just this slog that you're like dragging around. So when I feel that way, I have this I don't know what I'd call it, a regimen I put myself on where I make myself two things. One, if I think about a thing, I have to go do it right that second. Like it's just a rule because it starts to turn my energy back around. Or I'll just sit down and do like 3 things that I don't really want to do, like 3 emails I don't want to have to figure out how to write. And they're not things I'm avoiding like from a yucky way. It's just like it needs the time. And I feel like I have too many things to do to sit down and really like think through a thing or whatever it is. But because I do think the weight of things you're avoiding or things that are starting to feel heavy gets more weighty than just their original weight. How many times can I say the word weight in one sentence?
No, but it does. And I agree with you. And I like the way that you kind of, your strategy for dealing with it, because a lot of times the inattention is just this void in purpose. And so remedying that with purposeful action, dealing with it right when you think about it, or doing 3 things that you've been avoiding.
Well, 3 things, or the other thing I do, because this is what can lead to my overwhelm is, if I have my business list of stuff, but then like, when Turner was applying to colleges and then Kaya had her things, like when it feels like every column is stacked with a bunch of stuff, I'll also go through sort of each area of my life and take like 2 or 3 things off. And then that lightens the load and like gets me. But that's a place where it needs like more of a rapid decision, which is kind of okay because when I'm feeling that way, I don't have the energy to make them complex. So maybe I should just use that.
No, but I love how your mental stress level comes into balance with yet another spreadsheet mechanism.
True.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.